In this training video, I'm going to teach you how to make cash offers, meaning paying the seller in one lump sum, no matter if you're wholesaling or rehabbing, all coming up. Hey, this is Chris Goff, co-founder of the REIPro software, and I'd love for you to subscribe and click that notification bell for new training videos. They're going to help you grow your knowledge base, increase your confidence, and help put more money in your pocket as a real estate investor. Now, structuring an offer is one of the most important steps. You've found a deal, you've calculated repair costs, and now it's time to deliver the offer. In this training, I won't be covering the after repair value, but you can click in the link in the description and watch how I run comparable sales to determine this value. The after repaired value is the most important number when calculating an offer, so go ahead and head on over and watch that video first. Okay, now this formula took me 7 years to develop. This isn't some crazy formula where people say, take this percentage of the ARV, then back out repairs, or something similar. That would be insane, especially after I show you this formula. And if your offer is too high, you'll have trouble finding an investor to wholesale it to. Or if you're rehabbing, your profit just went down and you won't realize it until after you sell. So let me first start out by reviewing each part of the formula. The very first number that you will need to determine is the after repaired value. So the after repaired value is what someone will pay for a property after it's fixed up completely, all repairs made, and are ready to move into condition. And again, I encourage you to check out that video in the description below and learn how to calculate this. Next are the repair costs. So these are the total cost of repairs taken from the property inspection sheet, any sheet that you have to note this. I want you to start with some of the major repairs and work around the property, noting anything that needs to be either repaired or replaced. And what I encourage everybody to do is take pictures, right? So you're going to see things in pictures that you may have not saw with your own eyes. So definitely take a lot of pictures. A couple of free resources if you're struggling to find out, Chris, I have no clue how much something cost. These are two great resources that we use. We teach it. We do have them in REIPro as well. As I would encourage you to check it out. And what's great about them is they can narrow it down to your zip code. You know, what do things cost around where you live? Because as you know, it's going to be different across the country. Next is what we call the acquisition expense. So these are the costs associated with buying the property. These are going to be your title exam, title insurance, document prep, and so on. So when you close on the property, these are going to be those closing costs to buy the property. Okay, so there's going to be other costs besides this. A great place to find out exactly the cost of this or a general cost is to contact your local title company or maybe in a closing attorney where you're going to close these transactions and find out what do they charge. I can tell you the prices are all over the board depending on where you live in the country. So I do have a general percentage here, which is 1 to 3% of the after repaired value, which is going to give you a good number to get started with. Now, this number will be exaggerated most likely until you go down and actually get the actual cost. But hey, it's good to over exaggerate an expense. It's only going to lower your offer. So we make sure that we can get the right numbers. Next are what we call holding expense. So these are the costs associated with retailing or rehabbing these properties. These are going to be costs that are incurred while you're repairing it. Okay, so regardless if you're wholesaling or not, you need to calculate these costs because if you're wholesaling it, whoever you're selling the property to, they're the ones that are going to have these costs. And we need to justify that expense before we even make an offer to the seller. Now, again, I do generalize this from 1 to 2% of the repaired value. It could be a little bit more, a little bit less, but at the end of the day, it's going to be very close. These are all, costs are going to include taxes, insurance, gas, electric, water, things that you're going to have cost with during the rehab. Next is closing cost, right? So these are the costs associated with selling the property. So I want you to picture if you're a rehabber, you have to buy the property. You're going to have what we call the acquisition cost. And then you may rehab the house and sell it right away. You're going to have closing costs to sell it. Even if you decide to rent it for 5 years, you're still going to sell it at some point. So we need to get these numbers and put them into as an expense to justify a good offer. Now, it could change depending on if the buyer is getting FHA or a VA loan. But again, I want you to get with your local title company, your closing attorney. They're going to give you a great idea of about how much this is. Again, I'm going to go between 1 to 2% of the after repaired value. Next is the hedge expense. So these are the added cost in case your repair cost analysis was figured wrong, right? So the good thing about using a hedge is if you figured your repair cost correctly, you're going to have some extra money. There's always going to be a surprise expense when rehabbing houses. So you should always, I want you to add in some buffer, right, to this. Now, what I do is I take 10% of the repair cost, not the after repaired value, but the repair cost, because I know that I'm going to find some hidden surprise when I'm rehabbing a house. Okay, so 10% is at least going to cover those things. Now we have advertising expense. So if you know that you're going to fix up this property and you're going to advertise it yourself, I put in $500 to $1,000. You could go a lot less than this, and I know some people could go a lot more, but this is going to be the average cost if you're going to sell the property on your own. Next is agent commission. Now, I want you to think about this. It's not that we're necessarily buying it with an agent. It's when the rehabber is going to sell the property. So if they fix up the property and they turn around and sell it, they could use an agent. Maybe they use an agent 5 years from now. At some point, we're going to have to justify this expense. And what you don't want to do is not do it in the beginning. See, I always look at the cost of not just buying the property, but the cost of selling the property before I actually make the offer. And this is going to be one of those costs about when you sell the property somewhere down the road. Now, if you're wholesaling, you still need to calculate this, because what happens if your rehabber is going to use an agent to sell the property? And you may not know that ahead of time. And that's why I would encourage you to always put this in there. Okay, if they don't, you're just going to get a better deal at the end of the day. So we want to justify this expense. Next are payments. So if you've got a loan, either it be a bank, hard money, or private money, you may have to start making payments on this while you're fixing it up, or at least until you sell it or start making some income off of it, if you rented it or did a lease option or something of that nature. So you want to include those payment amounts in your offer. Now, you may not know exactly what the payment's going to be, but I can promise you, if you've worked with hard money lenders or private money or even some banks on this, it's roughly going to be the same, right? So the hard money is going to be one cost and the private money is going to be another cost. And a bank is typically, pretty standard interest rate. So definitely check out these costs ahead of time. You want to throw in these payments because it is an expense. And, that could be thousands of dollars that you're not going to make on this deal if you don't include this in your offer. So these are all the expenses. So next, what we call is the maximum offer before any profits. Okay, so you haven't made any money at this point. So this is the number you arrive at just before determining your all cash offer without adding in any profits. No matter if you're a wholesaler or a rehabber, you would break even at this point. So what we do with the profits is we basically have two categories. Either first, there's a wholesaler, which we call an assignment fee, or the second is just the rehabber. Now, if you're a rehabber, it doesn't mean that you always use a wholesaler. Again, you wouldn't have to add in their profit. You would make a little bit more money. If you're the wholesaler, you're going to have to add in not just your profit, as well as the rehabber's profit in this. Again, this is going to be subtracted from the ARV to come down to this number. So at the end of the day, what I want to do as an investor is I'm going to say, okay, this is what it would be worth in tip-top shape. And then I want to subtract all of my expenses, all the potential profits, and that ultimately is going to get me to that all cash offer. And that's what we're looking for, right? And again, we're not paying dollar bills to the seller, right? What we're saying is that all cash offer means is we're going to pay the seller in one lump sum. I mean, your rehabber may not be paying cash or using their own money. They may be using bank's money, hard money, private money. It doesn't really matter. We're just paying the seller all in one lump sum. Now, your assignment fee is how much you're going to profit from the deal. Okay. The rehabber's profit is, I like to use 15% of the ARV. Not too many rehabbers are going to do a deal, invest all their money, invest all their time, and not make at least 15%. So I think 15% is a good starting point. Now, could it go higher with some investors? Absolutely. I think as you start to work with, if you're a wholesaler and you start to work with some buyers, which are going to be those rehabbers, you're going to start to learn about what profit margin these investors want. It could also change depending on the amount of repairs in the property. If I know that this project's going to take me 6 months to rehab, my profit margin better be much higher than if I just put lipstick on the property and sell it in 30 days. So be sure to figure in these numbers. So let's start with the wholesaler fee. So this is what we call your assignment fee. And yes, you could do a double close, but I want to keep it simple at this point. So the assignment fee is your fee when wholesaling properties. This fee will vary per deal and could change depending on what offer is accepted. Generally, it can range anywhere from 3 to 20% of the ARV. Again, this is kind of a big number. I always start with like 3. I can tell you when I did a property in Maryland and found this property. They had a buyer for the property at $200,000 and they fell through. So I go and look at the property, and the owner of the property used to be her father's. They passed it down to her, and she was saying her husband was in the property every single weekend, putting a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, and she was just getting frustrated. And she didn't want to have anything to do with that house anymore. She was tired that her husband was eating up all the weekends. They were putting their own cash back into the property. And I know they had a buyer at 200. So I asked her, what do you think the least amount you would accept for the property, taking into consideration all the things that need to be done? And she looked at me and she said, Chris, I can't take less than $100,000. So we offered 96 and settled at 97. But the point is that I could have paid more. I could go through this formula, and my wholesale offer was one thing based on what I knew previous to what she told me at the house. And at this point, I haven't even calculated the offer, but I already knew that I could have paid more than $97,000 for this property. So sometimes it does depend on the conversation, the situation with the owner. So you got to take that in consideration. Next is the Rehabber Profit. You'll hear me say retailer a lot. It's the same person. So we're just putting a house in retail condition. So again, I like to use 15%. I think this is a good starting point. You definitely don't want to go less on this. And it really doesn't matter about the price of home at this point. You get $5 million house. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I want you to stick with that 15. Again, you'll be working with these rehabbers, and some may want 20%. Some may want more. Some may change depending on, the amount of repairs and the time it's going to take to rehab the house. This is going to bring us down to our all cash offer. So here's where we finally figure out what you can offer. Now we say offer a little less than the maximum offer, never more than your maximum offer. Because if that's your maximum offer, if all those expenses became true, and you wanted all of those profits to become true, you couldn't offer any more than your maximum offer, right? So we always want to start a little bit less for negotiation. Okay, I like to start 2%. I put here 2 to 5%, but I want to give you a minimum here at 2%. So it's a little bit less. It's not too much. And again, depending on the cost of the property here, but it's not that much, but it's something less. And it gives you a little bit of room. What you don't want to do is come in like $100,000 less than your maximum, because people aren't going to listen to you, right? I mean, this is about trust. People are not stupid. And I want to come in a little bit less and not have that much negotiation just to show this out. Look, I have no more room. Like, I'm already giving you my best offer from the beginning. I'm not here to jack around or anything. Like, I'm serious. And I think you're going to get a lot more offers accepted this way versus the other approach where you just have too much leeway and, you might get lucky once or twice, but it's going to catch up. If the numbers won't work for the seller, you just don't put it under contract. Remember, you cannot pay more than your maximum cash offer. It's really that simple. I want you to move on. Now, again, you should follow up with the seller in time, right? So people's circumstances change in time. Even though they said no today, it doesn't mean they're going to keep saying no. It's like the person that, hey, last week I wasn't in divorce, but this week I am. People's circumstances change. So I want you to follow up with these people, okay? All right, so let's break this down. So let's go through our expenses here. I know those are kind of the definitions and all that, but let's really get to the numbers now. I'm going to use as an example $285,000 as our after repaired value. And again, I encourage you to check out that video of how to determine the after repaired value, because it's a whole process of doing that. So first we have our repair expense. As I went through the property, I went and noted repairs. I calculated my repair costs to $46,500. Next is the acquisition expense. So I used 2%, $5,700. Holding expense, I used at 1%, which is $2,850. And you can see I'm subtracting here. So I've got the numbers. I'm going to be subtracting all of these expenses from the after repaired value. Closing cost, when I sell the property, so I've already bought the property, now I'm going to sell it. And again, it doesn't matter if you sell it in 30 days or if you sell it in 5 years, you will be selling it at some point. So include these costs. Next is the hedge expense. So 10% of the repairs, not 10% of the ARV. A lot of people mess this up. It's 10% of the repairs. Advertising expense, anywhere from $500 to $1,000, which I made a boo-boo there. It should say $1,000, but in this example, I'm going to just put 0. I do want to put in the agent's commission here. Obviously, a lot of rehabbers use agents to sell property. They sell more properties than anybody else. So I want you to include these costs. Where it is around me is 6%. That's the going rate. It could be different where you live. Payments for 6 months. In this example, I'm not going to have a loan or anything. I'm going to pay cash. So I'm going to put 0. If you did, obviously, you'd want to put those payment amount total here. This brings you to your maximum offer before any profits. So if I take $285 and I take out all the expenses, I come up with $202,500. So let's continue this. So remember, the ARV was $285. If you're wholesaling, I'm going to put in this. I'm going to start at 3%, which is $85.50. Now, as a wholesaler, what happens if the rehabber said, I'll give you $5,000? You might take the deal, right? So just keep in mind, you don't want to overdo this. Obviously, your goal as a wholesaler is to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Next is the rehabber's profit. Again, remember, a minimum 15%. That's going to be $42,750. So if you were to add just the two profits up, that would be $51,300. Now what I'm going to do is subtract that $51,300 because remember, I'm subtracting my expenses. I'm also subtracting the profits to ultimately get to my all cash offer. So this is the ARV minus expenses minus profits, $151,200. Now the percentage of ARV on this, now keep in mind, that's my maximum offer. Okay, so that's 53%. That's why it's crazy to hear people say, oh, you take this 65% or 70%, whatever these crazy formulas are. Look, the simple fact of the matter is it's the ARV minus expenses minus profits. That's your offer. But you do want to start a little less than that. And I just chose 3% here. So I'm going to start at 148. Now, again, that's not too far off from the 151. Okay, so, but it is a little bit less. Now we need to present the offer, right? So obviously in person is really key. I know there's going to be situations, circumstances where you can't. But if you can, I want you to do it in person because number one, it's harder for them to say no, but at the second time, they're more likely to ask you questions. Okay, so definitely want to try to do this in person. If you can't, obviously you could do an email with a follow-up phone call. You could do a phone call with a follow-up email. Either way, you need to have this on paper. People respond so much better when it's written down somewhere. It'd be an email or a Word document, something of that nature. Of course, in REIPro, we have offer letters that explains the offer, which I would encourage you to use. But you want to have something on paper. I also want you to make your offer strange, unique. In this, just don't say, I'll give you $75,000 for it. I want you to be $75,483 or $74,680 because it's going to keep the seller guessing on why in the world did you come up with that offer? They're always going to say there must be a reason why they came up with that number. So you're going to learn with experience what to say, how to say it. There are just too many situations to, go into a short training, but just pick up the phone. Be confident, make the offer, and don't be scared when they say yes, right? I think investors, I know I'm going to get some no's, right? I'm going to get more no's than yeses, but that's not what you're scared of. You're really scared of if they say yes, right? So don't be scared. This is the whole point why you're here, is to make the offer to get accepted. And that's where it's like, okay, what do I do now, right? So then we're going to move to the next step, which in this point would be putting it under contract as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching, and if you learned something valuable, please give us a thumbs up. If you have a comment or question, I'd be happy to answer it.